Hello everyone and welcome to Back to Our Roots. I'm Haley Judd.
And I'm Jen Albee.
And today we are actually switching it up on you. You may think we're going to be talking about the 7th commandment, but in fact, we are jumping ahead to the 9th commandment. And the 9th commandment is, you shall not covet thy neighbor's wife. And the reason that we're jumping ahead is because the 6th and the 9th commandment are very linked, which we'll get to in a moment. Right off the bat, I do want to jump in and share that while the commandment obviously talks about wives, we're talking about everyone here. The Catechism makes it clear, you shall not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor thy neighbor's husband. This is not meant to be sexist, and there are countless examples in the Bible of women who let their jealousy get the better of them. So this applies to all of us. But there is a key difference we need to understand between the 6th and the 9th commandment. You might be asking, why did God give the 9th commandment when the 6th one already says you shall not commit adultery? Why covet thy neighbor's wife? Isn't that redundant? But there's a key difference here. As we talked about the 6th commandment, you probably heard us talking about actions, right? Things that we do that break the commandment. The 9th commandment is really about what is in your heart, ways that you feel that will inevitably probably lead to those actions. And so we're really looking at the quote that Jesus spoke when he said, you have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say, even a man who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So what we're going to be talking about today is really matters of the heart. And that's the difference between the 6th and the 9th commandment. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Jen.
Right, so as we said, matters of the heart, which are really delicate and hard places to talk about because the heart can lead us in many different directions. And we are often told, follow your heart, listen to your heart, right? Listen to your heart. I love that song. Anyway, as we start thinking about it and learning more about it, evil can come from our hearts. And before I go any further, when I was first learning about this, I was like, oh, this is not all right. And there are certain Christian denominations that believe that human beings are just depraved from the beginning, that we're just full of depravity. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 2517 says, the heart is the seat of moral personality. Out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, fornication. The struggle against carnal covetousness entails purifying the heart and practicing temperance. So the heart, bad things can come from this place that we think only love grows, right? And it takes purifying it in order to get rid of that evil. And so, as I was saying before, that we are not just straight up depraved, but we do have concupiscence. And this is our natural tendency to fall into sin. The world is a fallen world. It is a sinful world. Sin entered the world in Genesis. So there's concupiscence. There's a great quote by St. Mark the Ascetic. I think I'm saying that right. I might be saying it wrong. And I'm sorry if I am. But he says, until you have eradicated evil, do not obey your heart, for it will seek more of what it already contains within itself. And how many times have we believed in that? Like, oh, just follow your heart, and it has kind of led us astray. I know it has for me. So we have to work on ridding our hearts of evil. And that takes some work.
Definitely. In preparing for this video, I found a great article that I'll include in our Going Deeper email, and it was written by a man named Shea, and he had a couple of great quotes about the 9th commandment that I want to share with you. One says, the striking thing about the 9th commandment is that it is absolutely unenforceable by any human agency in the world except for ourselves. For covetousness is a sin we commit in our souls, not in our bodies. So as Jen was saying, this 9th commandment is all about what's going on inside us. And he goes on to say this, in short, sin is rooted in the heart. What we do with our bodies is merely the fruit of the evil that comes from the heart. So the real work of curing sin has to begin there as well. And that's the real power behind the Ninth Commandment. It shows us where our actions that maybe aren't right are coming from. And it's all about this idea of purifying the heart. Purity of heart is what we're trying to accomplish. And so Jen's going to talk a little bit about how we get purity of heart and what that takes.
Right. So how do we purify the heart? I am an expert on purifying the heart. I'm just kidding. It's hard. And it takes effort on our part, right? We are constantly called to convert our hearts, minds, and souls toward Christ. It is an ongoing effort. It takes a willingness to change. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 2532, says, purification of the heart demands prayer, the practice of chastity, purity of intention, and of vision. Now, I think something that helps me is, well, that helps us all, really, is prayer. Something I want to say about prayer is this quote by Mother Teresa. She says, I used to believe that prayer changes things, but now I know that prayer changes us and we change things. So I think sometimes we have the tendency to go to God in prayer and we're like, God, can you just fix this? Can you just fix this? Do this, do this. You know, and he's not a genie. We have to invite him into our hearts and souls to transform us. And that's how prayer works. It's a conversation with the creator of the universe to do his will. It's not easy, believe me. There's another quote by St. Augustine, and this is paraphrased, that he says, love God and do whatever you please. And if you stop there, it's like, oh, okay, well, do whatever I please if I only love God. But if we're really loving God in the true and pure sense that we are called to love God, he goes on to say, for the soul trained in love to God will do nothing to offend the one who is beloved. So we have to constantly pray to love God better in order to love those around us better. And that's part of what it is to purify your heart.
Absolutely. And it is work and it takes time to get to that place where you feel pure of heart. One of the words that comes up in the Catechism a lot as you're reading about this purity of heart that we're called to is the word modesty, which was very interesting to us. And I think that I say that word and a lot of you probably think, yuck. That's not a word that we necessarily like. But the Catechism offers us a different way of looking at it. And it's saying that modesty is about protecting what is intimate. Protecting what is intimate. And that can be both your body, which I think is how we typically think of it, and your feelings. And that's the angle I really want to talk about for a second, right? So modesty it's about protecting what is intimate for your well-being, right? If you go around sharing your innermost feelings, your deepest longings, your deepest fears, there's a high likelihood that you're going to get hurt, that you're going to get broken. And modesty allows us to protect the most precious parts of ourselves, to keep them for the people who truly deserve them. You know, God, maybe a spouse, dear friends, parents. And it's all about protecting our hearts, right? That we need to be careful with these hearts. They have the capacity for evil. It takes work to root out that evil, but we also need to guard them, as the scripture says, and try to care for this heart that we've been given that can lead us astray at times. And I'd like to end today by just talking about the beatitude that might be coming to your mind that says, you know, blessed are the pure of heart, for they will see God. And that's beautiful. The more that we work, the more that we pray, we try to purify our hearts, the clearer you're going to see God. And then also, the purer your heart is, the easier it's going to be for you to do good. As Jen said, it's a beautiful cycle. While it takes work in the beginning to root out the things that are in our heart, as we do that work, it only gets easier to see God and then for Him to guide us in the ways He wants us to act, going back to the sixth commandment. Thank you so much for joining us today. May we all grow in purifying our hearts, and I'm going to pass it to Jen to introduce our family for this week.
Yes, so Amy Ramirez and Roy Ramirez, they have graciously accepted to talk about how they teach purity and chastity to their children. And they are a lovely family, so I hope you enjoy what they have to say. Thanks, guys.
Okay, hi, my name is Roy Ramirez, my wife Amy Ramirez, and my son Noah Ramirez. We've been married 20 years. In September will be 21 years, and we've been parishioners with Christ the King for approximately 6.5 years. We are originally from Austin, Texas, or Central Texas, and we've been living in the community for about that 6.5, 7 years. So I think today we're going to be talking about the Ninth Commandment,
which is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. But we're going to focus on purity and chastity and just how we've basically taught that with our kiddos and just share that information with our family. So I think first we have 4 kiddos, but our youngest is 3. And so when I think about even with her age, we pretty much just start talking about boundaries. Sometimes there's some hitting of siblings or things like that, those toddler behaviors. So we, just reinforce hands are for hugging.
Well, and then, talking about purity and chastity as a means of interpreting the Ninth Commandment, right, which is thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife, right? So that is an interesting, commandment, right? Because nowadays it's not necessarily sometimes used in translating values over to, how children are taught, purity and chastity, right? So, however, it's a great way to interpret it or look at it because
we're respecting, teaching respect for the, especially
right.
As a young kid.
Yeah.
We, with her, we teach her, these are times where you need to ask for privacy.
Right.
And so even very young, we start discussing that and boundaries.
Right. So for example, with Noah, I remember as a young man, he's 13 now, so he's still a very young man, but even younger, I would always ask him, okay, when you see a young lady or lady in general, right, open the door for them. Just trying to teach him to be that nice young gentleman in particular. But and as you get older and you start to become a young man and that whole interaction with young ladies as well starts to take on another meaning. So talking about what you were talking about, learning boundaries and making sure that again, purity and chastity, you're understanding to respect your own self and your own body, but respecting others as well.
Right. I will say, as the kids have gotten older, one of the things we also emphasize are friendships, and really just encouraging them through. I know my Sarah's 9, up to Noah's age 14. Olivia's almost 20. So we encourage them to really focus on friendships because you learn so much about making good friends, keeping good friends. So we really just encourage them to focus a lot on that because that can be challenging enough.
Yeah.
So,
and I think the way in which we indirectly teach about the commandments and this one as well is through prayer, right? And through prayer, obviously we say these prayers every day, the Our Father, Hail Mary, and the glory be. But you know, through those prayers, you start to, at least I do, and I'm sure everyone interprets them differently, but you start to really think about the words and how they reflect on your everyday life. And so through prayer, I think, is another way that you might not make that connection immediately, but you know they do. I think, for lack of a better term, kind of learn by osmosis, right? To start to seep in the words of prayer, and then to make those connections as they get older with their actions.
You know, I try to not, like, even if we're playing like a rough game, I don't like to push people, mostly because, empathy and sympathy, I don't want to push them. I don't want to push them, because if they push me, I wouldn't like that. So yeah, yeah. I mostly just respect other people's bodies, because I know that I wouldn't like mine. I wouldn't like being shoved or punched or stuff like that.
And so that's the way that we practice the Ninth Commandment. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.